Okay, let's get this Volantex 750mm P51D Mustang in the air. I love this little plane. One of the nicest flying planes I have in my inventory. It took quite a bit of effort to get it there, but once I got it there, it's so nice. Okay, let's launch. 60% throttle. Takes right off. Sounds like I may need to balance that prop again. Oh, that does a sweet stall turn, doesn't it? Just an awesome handling plane. Nice axial rolls. Try not to hit myself. Plenty of power. Extremely maneuverable. What's not to like, huh? Big, huge loops. Okay, so when we get back to the hangar, I'll go back through what I would have done differently on this plane if I had to do it over again. I really didn't have much of a choice because I had a component failure. I still don't know if it was a servo, aileron servo, or if it was a receiver that I lost control of the plane. I was pulling through a split S maneuver, and all of a sudden it just started spiraling nose down to the ground, and I had no control over it. So I don't know if the servo hung up on it or if it was the receiver that I lost contact with. I don't know. But I had to do a lot of work to it after that. I replaced the motor, replaced the mount. I put I think I've got a 20 amp ESC in it, but you really only need a 12. I put a Racer Star 2212 1400 kV motor in it with a JXF 7x4 composite prop. And that power system works really, really well with this plane. Don't you think? And it's a beautiful, I think, beautiful looking airframe. They just didn't have a very good power system in it to begin with. This should have been set up for a 3S power system from the beginning instead of a 2S power system. Just a beauty. Absolute beauty. Nice for close proximity flying because it is so maneuverable. And it has, you know, for a Warbird, I think it has pretty good slope light too. And that look awesome in the air. Okay, timer's up. Okay, so let's check our directions real quick. We look good in that direction. See if we can stay below the sun. That direction looks good. All right, see if we can bring it in. If I don't trip over something here. Now, let's go around. Just wasn't feeling it, you know. As a matter of fact, let's come in from the opposite direction because now it feels like I've got the wind in my face. Had a little bit of a wind shift there. Sweet. I absolutely love this little P51D. It is absolutely awesome. Alright, so I will see you back at the hangar, and I'll tell you how I would do this differently if I had to do it again. It would be a lot easier, believe me, than what I had to do. And this is absolutely a fantastic airframe. I absolutely love the way this plane handles on the 3S with the amount of power it has. It's absolutely fantastic. I will provide links in the show notes to all the components that I would use in this plane again if I had to do it over again. And I hadn't torn up the stock motor mount. All right, so I'll see you back there.
So, what do you guys think of this P51D Mustang? It's red-tailed P51D Mustang. One of the best flying aircraft that I have in my stable. I misstated something in the video. I did not replace the stock motor with a 2212 1400 kV motor. I replaced it with a 2208 1400 kV motor. This is the stock motor that came out of it. And Volantex is a little misleading on this. Now, when I purchased this plane and I saw the 4-blade prop, it specified that it had a 2808 1800 kV motor in it. And I thought, well, a 2808 1800 kV motor should have plenty of torque to spin that 4-blade prop fast enough on a 2S LiPo. Well, they fudged the numbers because how they got their 28 millimeter in diameter was by measuring the outside of the bell, not the diameter of the stator. So this is actually a 2208 1800 kV motor, not a 2808, which is why on the stock setup with that 4-blade prop on a 2S LiPo, it gives you good power to do aerobatics and stuff with it on a 2S LiPo, on the stock power system. But because this little motor has to work so hard, it pulls a lot more amps than it should. And so you get a lot less flight time on it. I think I was running out of power after about 3.5 minutes of flight on the stock power system because they overpropped it. So I've gone over this information before, but I'm still getting a lot of questions on it, on how did I get it flying so well and how did I get it with so much power? What did I do? Okay, well, as I stated in the video, I crashed it. I still don't know if it was the receiver or the aileron servo that quit on me, but I busted up the stock motor mount. And so I used a 1400 kV motor with a 2-blade prop because I'd already done thrust testing on these motors, so I knew the weight of the plane the amount of power, the amount of amps it was going to pull in with this power setup. So I knew this was going to be a good combination for this. Okay, so if I had not crashed it, let's say I had this plane and I had it in stock configuration, 2S power system, but I wasn't really happy with it. Okay, so here's what I would do, assuming that your motor mount isn't busted up like mine was, where you could still use the stock motor. All right, let me give you the numbers on my power system, and then I'll give you the numbers on the stock motor with a different prop on it. All right, so on this system, it's 2208, 1400 kV motor. It's a racer style. I've got a JXF 7x4 two-blade composite prop on it. At full throttle, it gives me 517 grams of thrust, pulling 9.7 amps. At 50% throttle, it gives me 202 grams of thrust, pulling 3.2 amps, which gives me a gram per watt efficiency at 100% throttle at 4.3 grams per watt, and at 50% throttle, 5.1. So it's also very efficient, which is why it gives me so much power, plus it gives me a lot of flight time. My thrust to weight ratio, because my all-up weight with the 3S LiPo that I use weighs 375.2 grams. So 517 grams of thrust, 375.2 grams all-up weight gives me a 1.38 to 1 thrust to weight ratio. That's why it performs so well. Okay, so if you were to use the stock motor, but you replace that 10 amp speed controller that they've got in there with a 12 amp speed controller, you'll be a little bit lighter than I am. But I'm going to use the same weight numbers that I have, because I've got a full-size 20 amp speed controller in it. You could get by with the lightweight 12 amp ESC. So you replace that 12 amp ESC, you use the stock motor, but you install a KMP, EMP, Rctimer 6x3 Sport high efficiency prop, composite prop. You will be producing with the stock motor, 1800 kV 2208 motor, 580 grams of thrust at full throttle, pulling 11.5 amps, 297 grams of thrust at 50% throttle, pulling 5.1 amps. It still gives you a gram per watt efficiency at 100% throttle of 4 grams per watt, and at 50% 4.6, so it's still very efficient. You won't get quite the amount of flight time that I get on my setup, but you're having to do a lot less work, you're not having to purchase another motor, and you're going to get a 1.55 to 1 thrust to weight ratio, so you're going to have more power than I have on my system. So it will perform a little bit better, and you're going to get a little less flight time out of it. But I can get 6 to 7 minutes of flight time out of mine the way I fly with this little GMB 3S 80C 550 milliamp hour LiPo. Now, I didn't have to modify the battery bay, but it is a snug fit. This weighs 55 grams, and I'll take the measurements off here real quick so you know. It fits in there nice and snug, and I've got plenty of room, you know, on top of it to put the wires in. This is 58 millimeters by 31 millimeters. Let's call it 31 and a half by 21. Okay, so that's about the maximum size battery you want to put in it without having too much trouble getting the battery seated in the battery bay. I would also recommend, you know, this is the plug-and-play version. I would recommend that if you get your receiver, you get a diversity and long antenna, a diversity long antenna receiver. I cut a little hole in the top of my canopy, and I brought one of my antennas up in the bubble right in front of the pilot here, and then the other one lays back along the fuselage. So there's no chance of a brownout with that battery, you know, since it installs vertically. If you have a receiver with short antennas, it's possible you can block the signal with those vertically mounted LiPos. Okay, so I put all the stuff that I used in the show notes along with the prop that you could use with the standard motor. You probably won't be able to use the spinner anymore Like I don't have it on mine. You see how it flies without it. It's not as pretty, but it flies extremely well, and it's a well-performing aircraft. So what I would do, if I was going to use the stock motor, I would take a Dremel tool and I would cut off the threaded portion of this. I have, it looks like a 3.175 millimeter shaft, but you probably want to use a digital caliper to verify that. But I have links to two different adapters that use set screws. One is for a 3 millimeter shaft to a 5 millimeter hub. The other one is a 3.175 millimeter shaft to a 5 millimeter hub, so you can use a standard 5 millimeter hub prop on it without any problems. That's what I would do. So there you go. If you want to get this stock plane flying on a 3S setup and have it flying at least as well as mine flies, with at least as much power as what I have, that's what I would do. All right, so a lot less work, less expense, different prop, an adapter, 3S LiPo, and a 12 amp ESC in your business. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I will see you in the air.